You're probably reading this because you like creepypasta stories. I know I, in particular, love Pokemon related ones. My favorite so far has to be the one about Silver's point of view in the games, Tarnished Gold. I've read many of them, but most, if not all, seem to have something in common. They are about a previously owned game that they found or bought through some method, but who knows whether those stories are true or not. I haven't had the luck to stumble upon any of these supposedly hacked games. Even though I collect old Game Boy cartridges and many of them were used, the closest I've come to playing one for real is the fan created Lost Silver. While browsing through it, I noticed someone made a comment about how all Pokemon creepypastas are about the old games, and none of them are 3rd or 4th gen. So I had an idea. I have a college friend who's studying game programming in the hopes that he makes his own games someday, but he's also an excellent hacker. He's been able to come up with many action replay codes that do unusual and generally useless things, but I find them to be very interesting. He's even created a few for Pokemon, although mostly for his own benefit. After I got said idea, I called him and wondered if he'd be able to make a hack of my Pokemon Heart Gold game. I had a copy of both Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but Soul Silver was my main game, and so I had no useful Pokemon or items on the Heart Gold cartridge. I also mentioned it would be a sickly humorous way to pass the time until the English release of Black and White 2. He wasn't sure how long it would take, but he told me he would love to try such a challenge. Since I had no other means of reaching him since he lives at another college several hours away, I mailed him my Heart Gold cartridge. About 3 months later, I received it back in the mail, along with a letter which basically stated that he was sorry it took so long because he was busy with college and work and things of that sort, and creating a hack was time consuming. He also advised me to stop playing the game if I was too freaked out to continue, and he also left a little note of all the events which were supposed to take place, in case curiosity bested me. I was eager and nervous to start the game. After loading it into my Nintendo DS and starting up the power, I noticed something odd. Rather than reading the usual Pokemon Heart Gold, Nintendo on the select menu, it said Pokemon Plague, with dot 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 as the publisher. I didn't know why it was called Plague at the time, but it was definitely something eerie. The game started up as usual, with no changes to the opening animated sequence, except when the three legendary beasts were supposed to appear, there was simply blackness. Even the very end where Suicune is supposed to be looking up at the sky, Suicune was missing. I checked the trainer's profile, and the character's name was Gold. No suspicion there, as I had actually named my character that. But the number of hours played was 0, and the number of Pokemon in the Pokedex was also 0. It said I had 16 badges, though. When I loaded the game, Gold was standing in his room with a Raikou standing beside him, as all Pokemon in the first slot of this party do in this game. But there was no music. The room looked normal save for various spots of black on the wall. The whole room, in fact, seemed darker, as if it was nighttime. The Raikou had some black patches on him that didn't look like his normal stripes, so I checked my party. The unnamed Raikou was poisoned with 4 HP, and was accompanied by a genderless Murkrow and a fainted Haunter named Ghost. When I checked their summaries, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with them appearance-wise. This didn't explain Raikou's strange overworld sprite, though. I walked from the center of the room to the stairs in the top left corner. All the while, the screen was flickering and making that strange buzzing sound indicating my poisoned Pokemon. Before I went downstairs, I checked my bag. No items whatsoever. Just as I went downstairs, the screen went completely black, and there was a loud crashing noise, like a stone falling. Some text appeared that said, "You took one step too many." After pressing A, the text vanished, and Gold Sprite faded in. I took a few steps, and a gray outline appeared behind me. It took me a few moments to realize that this was Raikou's sprite, but entirely black or transparent. I checked my Pokemon again. Raikou's sprite was normal, but had black patches all over him like the overworld sprite in my room. Murkrow still looked normal, but Ghost Sprite had been changed to look like the ghost from the original Lavender Town. Either a sick joke or my friend was paying homage to whoever wrote Creepy Black. I wandered around aimlessly for a few moments before I decided to check my map. I was in Johto, because apparently Kanto wasn't available yet, but my trainer sprite indicating where I was nowhere to be seen. In addition, the routes looked corrupted or decayed, with holes or scratches in them, and the map's colors had been doused in reds and browns. There was also a demented-looking Entei sprite in the middle of Violet City. It was the sprite that appeared on the map after the beasts were released from the brass tower, but the eyes were pools of black, and Entei's face was just as scabby as the map roads. Upon returning to the overworld, I was surprised to see my location had changed, or appeared. I wasn't sure. I was now on a linear route, only 2 squares tall, and was heading east. To the west was a steep cliff, which I obviously couldn't get by. There were no trees, the route was enclosed by rocks. The grass was dark reddish brown. I began to walk a little, and every few steps the screen would shudder from poison. Raiko was still walking behind me, and had appearance-wise returned to normal, although he did look a little darker. After about 50 steps, I was confused. Shouldn't Raikou have fainted already? I mean, he started with 4 HP after all. Apparently, yes. When I checked Raikou's status again, he was listed as fainted, and his battle sprite's body had turned brown. There were black patches all over, and a few places that looked corroded. His head was lowered, and there was purple slime dripping from his jaws and scattered all over his feet. His eyes were missing, and he was left with 2 perfectly round holes. There was no information on him. All his information was blank, save for his attack section. He knew Toxic, Crunch, Spit Up, and Slash, moves this Pokemon couldn't learn naturally. I immediately switched to Murkrow, who still looked normal at this point. I didn't really want to look at that horrible Raikou. I switched back, but only for a moment, just to listen to its cry. The cry was a normal Raikou cry, but slowed down, with an ugly gurgling sound added to it. Raikou still followed me. I decided, for the heck of it, to turn around and talk to him. The Raikou made no noise, and a speech balloon appeared with some purple bubbles. Text appeared at the bottom, and it read, "Raikou is ill with the effects of the plague." I didn't know what this plague was, but with an off feeling, I knew it was the reason why Raikou looked so awful. I continued walking for a minute or two, with no major changes in the environment, although I could hear some music playing faintly, and it seemed to be gradually increasing in volume with every few steps. I didn't recognize the tune at the time, but it freaked me out. The poison shuddering was still happening. I reached the end of the road, which was a hole in the ground in front of another cliff face. With nothing to lose, I stepped into the hole, where my character immediately vanished, rather than comically running in place before falling, as what would usually happen. Raikou stayed outside and didn't appear to be following me into the hole. I landed on a single square of the cave tile, with rocks scattered around the black void. I checked the map. Gold Sprite was again missing, but the Entei was there, this time in the very middle of the map. The map itself was styled the same as before, but there were random corrupted routes everywhere, and there were no cities. I stood on the square for a few minutes, unable to move. The music was gradually getting louder still, and I could finally recognize it as the 8-bit theme for Meckercheek City. It was being played at a much lower pitch, and the notes were being played at horribly clashing chords. After a minute or two, the music stopped abruptly with a single deep bell chime, and the screen began to warp in ways I cannot even describe. There were occasional flashes of bright light, until the screen turned black, and normal battle music started. Gold Sprite slid into battle, but there was no opponent. Then suddenly, a very gruesome Entei appeared, with its screech, and that gurgling noise. There was no text announcing that a wild Entei appeared, but there was a box that stated, "Free yourself while you can." Entei's fur was mangled with dark patches of blood. In several places there were broken bones stabbing from its body. His paws and chest were corroded like Raikou's body was. There were 2 round eyeballs sitting in its sockets, brown and shriveled, not looking like they should fit his head. Gold sent out Murkrow, since apparently Raikou had fainted, and a battle initiated. I had no items, and it wouldn't let me switch out Murkrow for Ghost. Run wasn't even an available option. I could only attack, and Murkrow had 1. Fly. Entei was at level 99, so he attacked before my level 5 Murkrow could. Entei used Toxic, which poisoned my Murkrow. After that attack, the screen flashed black for half a second before the battle screen appeared again. Murkrow's back sprite was now splotch black, and as I recognized the situation, I began to shake. Murkrow flew up high. The animation was normal, except the background was brown instead of blue when Murkrow vanished. It skipped my turn, and then Entei used Roar. I expected the attack to miss, but it didn't. Instead, the running away sound played, and the text read, "Murkrow has fled." The battle didn't end though. Instead, Gold said, "Go for it, Raikou," and a poisoned Raikou was sent out. I tried not to question how he ended up back on my team. Raikou's back sprite matched his front, and I almost felt bad for how ill he looked. Out of Raikou's 4 attacks, which I previously mentioned, I chose Crunch, since it seemed to be the only one that could do much damage. Entei used Toxic. but it failed since Raikou was already poisoned. Raikou used Crunch. Rather than the fangs appearing for the battle animation, several patches of blood appeared on Entei's arm, with the crunch sound being played every time one appeared. Entei's health dropped a quarter of the way. The turn ended, and Raikou was hurt by the poison, even though his health was already at zero. I was about to use Crunch again, but apparently it had lost all its PP for that move. I chose Slash, which went first. It was apparently super effective, and knocked Entei's health down to less than half. The Entei sprite then changed. His head lowered, and there were several deep scratches across his neck. Entei used Mirror Move, which caused Entei to use Slash, but rather than hurting Raikou, the attack happened to Entei, and his health dropped to near zero. The sprite changed again, and this time his head was lowered to the ground. His eyeballs rolled into his head, and some purple slime began to dribble from his jaws. Raikou was hurt by poison again, as was Entei, even though he didn't have any status effects listed. Entei's health bar vanished, and his cry played at a lower pitch, which normally would have indicated that he fainted. But the battle still continued, even though I didn't pick a move. Raikou used Spit Up, which did nothing, aside from adding a bit more purple slime to stream from his mouth. Entei used Last Resort. The screen went black, and the music stopped. The previous warped Ecruteak theme played again, and I was returned to the overworld, where there was a single line of gray bricks leading me north to the black void and rocks. As I began to move north, I could see the Pokemon following me was an overworld sprite for Ghost, which confused me, even though I thought Raikou was in my party, and Ghost couldn't even have been selected for battle. Something odd I also noticed was that my trainer sprite appeared darker, somehow. A chill went down my spine when I made the connection that it looked similar to Raikou's darkened sprite at the beginning. By now, the screen had stopped shuddering, and I wasn't sure if this was scary or relieving. I checked my trainer card to see if there were any changes to Gold's image. As I suspected, his skin was splotched black, and there was something different. Half his face was corroded away, revealing muscle melting into skull. The gym leader sprites were all replaced by black squares. I closed that menu and checked my Pokemon. Ghost was not in my party. Instead, I now had a poisoned Raikou and a seemingly normal Suicune. I checked their sprites. In addition to Raikou's previously rotting figure, his bones were visible, and his muscles and tendons were dangling from his body. All his flesh appeared to be brown and rotten, and there still appeared to be poisoned vomit at his mouth. Suicune was shiny, and nothing seemed to be wrong with him, except that he was frozen. Level 100 with full health as well. I decided to switch Suicune to the front of my party, and upon returning to the overworld, I had a shiny Suicune following me. After walking north for a while, the screen began to shudder. There was a blackout followed by a run-away sound. When the light returned, I started. Gold was standing on Melt Silver, where Red usually stood, but the snow was soaked in a cruel-looking crimson. At the base of the stairs appeared the static overworld sprite for Suicune, colored completely black. The screen flashed black, and when visibility returned, Raikou and Entei were on either side, still looking ill. My character suddenly jumped back, as if he'd been pushed by an invisible force. He stood in front of the three dogs, looking up at Red's pedestal, and there was a horrid squelching noise. The screen darkened gradually until there was no more visibility, just that demented Ecruteak theme, and a bloody noise. The sound for the attack Crunch played several times. Every time it sounded, there was a gasping noise, followed by gurgling. The screen remained black, but during the noise sequence, I swear I saw very quick flashes of images. One of Suicune's face, with eyes bleeding and savage teeth, another of a maskless Entei, whose face had been replaced by torn, bleeding muscle, and one of Raikou, whose eyes seemed to captivate me for the moment I saw him. A text box appeared. Gold used Last Resort. A long scream started, but it was interrupted as if the game had froze. It was a continuous, awful shriek, and suddenly both screens messed up on my DS. The bottom screen was a jumble of pixels, but the one on top clearly resembled a face. It was a warped version of Gold, enlarged to fit the screen. It was hatless, and his hair was all over the place. His face looked horrific, and his eyes were round sockets with shriveled brown orbs inside. His mouth was twisting off his face in a grin, and the jaw looked to be falling off. The back of his throat was jammed with purple ooze, which was slowly dribbling past his teeth. The screen was corroded in several places. After this, I immediately closed my DS and the sound stopped. The green light blinked normally, which was a relieving reminder that it was not real. I shut the power off and took the game out, stuffing it back into the mail pouch it came in. It was the last time I ever loaded up that copy of Heart Gold, or Plague as the game called it. A few days later I called my friend, telling him that the hack was impressive, but it scared the living crap out of me. He felt bad about frightening me, but at the same time, I was happy he made such an effective game. I then asked him how he made the very last sprite of the trainer's face, which was very well done, even though it disturbed me to no end. He immediately freaked out and told me that the sprite wasn't supposed to be in the hack. He apparently made it a while ago for a different project that he scrapped. Somehow it got mixed in with the coding of that game, and my friend claimed that he played through the hack several times and that that last part never happened. Later on, I checked the note he left me of the hack's events, and apparently after Gold used Last Resort, he was supposed to fall to the ground like Raikou did, and the game would reset, disallowing anyone to save. The last glitch bit is what really set this game off for me, so I sent it back to my friend and told him he could keep it if he still wanted to play around with the coding of the Heart Gold at any time. As far as I know, he still has the codes for the Plague hack, but it's so complex that it's hard for regular gamers to use on AR. Who knows, he may end up showing it to other people someday, but for now, he's keeping it a secret.